I'm Richard Plotkin, one of the co-founders of the Max Cure Foundation that was formed as a 501c3 nonprofit in December of 2008. What I'm going to do now is give a retrospective of our last 11 years of the Max Cure Foundation, and before that, the Max Cure Fund. Let me first start with an email that I recall sending to families and friends on May 3, 2007. The email started, "Today, Max is 4 years old. Yesterday, he was diagnosed with cancer." You can see, even 11 years later, the emotional impact that had on me then and will have on me for the rest of the days of my life. That was the beginning of the journey that the Plotkin family has made and has been on for the last 11 years. The head of the pediatric cancer unit at Memorial Sloan was Richard O'Reilly, the brother of one of my partners at my law firm. I spoke to Richard and asked him to tell me more about the pediatric cancer and the needs of pediatric cancer. Dr. O'Reilly told me that childhood cancers is the most underfunded of all cancers. I asked him, what can my family do? He told me that he was in the process of forming an immune cell therapy lab that would help children as well as young adults who were diagnosed with cancer but were not responding favorably to the standard chemotherapy and radiation treatments. I told him I would like to start a fund which we called the Max Cure Fund. He told me to do so, I would have to guarantee $25,000 over a 3-year period. I told him I had no problem with that. We formed the Max Cure Fund in May of 2007. By December 2008, we had collected $285,000, which was used as the seed monies for the immune cell therapy lab. To date, the Max Cure Foundation and the Max Cure Fund has donated $926,000 towards the lab. In addition, with this year's grants that will be made to the Max Cure Fund, not only for the lab, but for researchers doing research at Memorial Sloan Kettering to help children with cancer, we will hit and exceed the $1 million mark. So in our mission, which we call our fundraising mission, we have contributed not only the $1 million, and I'll round that off to Memorial Sloan Kettering, but approximately $500,000 to other researchers doing research in an effort to find cures for childhood cancers. We added to our mission of funding research, helping low-income families and military families battling cancer in their children. We call that the Roar Beyond Barriers program. This was started as in our minds after we helped the family of Katie Stewart in the Hamptons. We were able to donate to Katie's family over $110,000 over a 2-year period. Unfortunately, Katie ultimately died at the age of 12 of her liver cancer. But this was a very big step in the evolution of Max Cure to see what we as a family could do to help other families who are facing a family's worst nightmare. Katie's parents were able to devote substantially more time to caring for Katie over the 3-year period from diagnosis to death. Her father, Jim, was able to give up his coaching services at East Hampton High. He was able to give up his pool cleaning service. And Bridget, their mother, who was the vice principal at a school in Montauk, was able to give up her tutoring services solely as a result of the monies we were able to contribute to that family. As a result of our experience, not only with our own family, but with the Stewarts, we saw what an incredible financial burden there was on families who had children with cancer. We knew that the medical expenses would be covered, but we also knew the incredible drain. So I met, after hearing, let me back up. I went to the opening of the Livestrong Center in Austin, Texas, right after Katie died. So this would have been sometime in 2011. And I heard Lance Armstrong talk about Dr. Harold Freeman, who he credited with saving his life from testicular cancer, and said that of the 600,000 people diagnosed with cancer each year, who die each year in this country of cancer, 200,000 of those deaths are preventable. I then said to myself, how many of those 200,000 deaths are of children whose parents cannot afford the luxuries that my family had, and who did not have the benefit of the largesse of the people in East Hampton who contributed freely to the Stewart family and to Katie's. So I met with Harold Freeman, who was the chair of the Ralph Lauren Cancer Center. This would have been in 2011. And I asked him if he could identify a family in Harlem, single mother, 5 kids, one of whom had cancer. I said, this is the type of family that I want to help. He then told me that he does a navigation system for adults nationally who were not well educated, who he helped through the massive amount of paperwork as well as finances. He's told me that nobody's doing this nationally for children. I said, now there is. That was the beginning of our Roar Beyond Barriers program. Since that time, we have helped nationally over 160 families by giving them gift cards monthly and providing other services for them. As one example, we were helping a family in Baltimore, Maryland, an immigrant family with a little boy, 8 years old, with cancer. I got a note from the mother thanking us so much for the gift cards that we sent on a monthly basis. She told me her son died, but she wanted to tell me how much joy he received when he went to the Target stores and every month with our gift cards. Wow. And he was allowed to buy a toy. She said this was the happiest moments, multiply that by 170 plus families, and that's one of the things Max Cure Foundation is so proud of. We then decided to expand our services to the military families in the military who were battling cancer in children. I received a phone call from a foundation who told me that I was recommended to Navy Special Operations in Washington as a foundation that might be interested in being able to help an active duty Navy SEAL whose 5-year-old daughter was diagnosed with cancer. I spoke to the folks at Navy Special Operations. They said they vetted us and they would very much like us to head the fundraiser for this family on a national level. But I had to assure them of confidentiality, that I was the only person then that knew the name and address of the family because of the security risks. We did a national fundraiser over a period of 3 months and sent the family a check for over $20,000. I got an email, from a guy who was a Navy SEAL for 19 years, 38 years old, who fought for us all over the world and risked his life. And he said in the email, he can't believe that someone he doesn't even know would go out of his way the way Max Cure Foundation went out of our way for this family. Ultimately, the child died. But not all stories are as successful as that of Max and Max Cure Foundation. Max offers hope. Max had stage 4 cancer that Memorial Sloan had never seen. He's now an 11-year survivor, plays lacrosse, basketball, and is just dates, believe it, at 15, and is having a normal childhood. Basically, we were fortunate in September of 2015 to bring on Jonathan Agan as our executive director. Jonathan's story was not as successful as my family's story. Jonathan's daughter, Alexis, died at the age of 4.5 after suffering from a terminal cancer that strikes children known as DIPG. Jonathan, like me, was a retired lawyer, and the two of us have formed what is known as one of the most successful advocacy groups among the Pediatric Cancer Foundation. Jonathan has been appointed by the National Cancer Institute to a steering committee where he is just one of 2 outside representatives, non-doctors. He has been appointed and has given speeches all over the country as well as Canada. He has offered articles through the Huffington Post and elsewhere. Jonathan's story with Alexis is a story that too many families have to confront. But one of the things that Max Cure Foundation offers is hope. And one of the stories that I will share with you is that I'm very active in Washington, D.C., in an organization known as Coalition Against Childhood Cancer. And I attended a meeting with about 100 other participants, people involved with pediatric cancer foundations. And I look around the room and I see people in their 30s and 40s, but I don't see too many of us with gray hair in our 60s and 70s. And people talk about the parents and they talk about the children, but nobody was talking about the grandparents. So with another grandfather by the name of Joe Baber, whose grandson is also a survivor, and a grandmother named Donna Carmichael, who lost her grandchild to cancer, and Tom's last name I can't recall. He lost his granddaughter to cancer. He can't talk to me without crying. So after the meeting, I got Joe, Donna, and Tom together, we were all obviously grandparents. And I said, let's form an organization. And we formed Grandparents in Action that would service grandparents who were directly impacted by a child with cancer. And we then brought the word out that remember the grandparents who not only are suffering through having a grandchild with cancer, but are seeing the pain and the stress being caused on their children as their children watch their son or daughter battle this disease. I was told early on that the greatest stress facing families with a child with cancer was financial, because whether the child lives or dies is out of their hands. It's in the hands of God and the physicians. One of our families, for example, out of Bedford-Stuy, Brooklyn, 9-year-old boy with brain cancer, 4 siblings, single mother. She was a crossing guard. She had to give up her job as a crossing guard to take her son to for cancer treatments at NYU. When she lost her job as a crossing guard, she lost her right to food stamps, because you have to work in order to get the food stamps. We put her on our Broad Beyond Barriers program for years. I brought them out to our home in East Hampton to attend our fundraising events. When the child was graduating the 5th grade to go into the 6th grade, they had a special ceremony going from one school in Bed-Stuy to the other. The mother told me that each of the children were told they could have 4 guests. The child said, I want Mr. Richard as one of my 4 guests. So that I trumped the grandmother. I was the only white face in the audience that day. And when the child, saw me, he just lit up with a smile. Mr. Richard was here. To give you another idea, we typically gave this family $1,000 a month at Target stores to allow them to buy food, clothing, whatever they needed. Medical expenses were covered by Medicaid, I'm sure, or by charity. I'm out of my home in the Hamptons, and I get a call from Florisha, was her name, the mother. She's already spent $1,000, and they still had a week to go before she got our next card. We have no food in the house because I used the money you give us to buy food and necessities. I then spent the afternoon talking to Target store in Bed-Stuy or Brooklyn to try to convince them to giving them my credit card, and ultimately that's what happened. This is the story behind Roar Beyond Barriers. Now let's talk about advocacy. I was a trial lawyer for over 40 years. Jonathan Agan was a lawyer. He's in his mid-40s. He too was a trial lawyer. Together, we make a very formidable advocacy program. The first thing I did when I got involved with pediatric cancer was I noted that people were all over the lot as far as statistics and what were the facts underlying the story of pediatric cancer. And one thing I decided and told people, that as a lawyer, I learned that consistency is much more important than accuracy. And for us to be credible, we needed to be consistent throughout the entire pediatric cancer community. So Joe Baber, the other grandfather, and I put together what is now one of the leading authorities for all information relating to pediatric cancer, survivorship, and the like. It can be found on the website of Coalition Against Childhood Cancer, otherwise with the acronym CAC, CAC2. Basically, Joe and I annually update it and source it. It has been relied on by many in the field. One of the interesting sidelights is I've become very friendly with Joe Baber. Joe grew up in Alabama. He now lives in Virginia. But we basically characterize ourselves as the redneck from Alabama meets the lawyer from we basically characterize ourselves as the redneck from Alabama meets the Ivy League lawyer from New York City. And together they, having suffered what we went through with our children, our grandchildren, we got together and we're making a difference. And that's the point. That's what Max Cure Foundation has done for the last 11 years and will continue to do till the day I die and thereafter. Then I was asked in March 2014, March 7, 2014, if I could help a family from Virginia. This became known as the Josh Hardy matter. This put Max Cure Foundation on the national scene. It put me individually on the national level, where I have given speeches and talks about the Josh Hardy matter at Harvard Medical School, 7 presentations at Texas A&M down in Texas. I've been interviewed on NPR radio. I have been interviewed on CBS, National Syndicated Radio. I've been on Fox and Friends on Fox News Channel. Basically, we are credited, the Max Cure Foundation is credited with extending the life of 7-year-old Josh Hardy for 2.5 years. That on March 7, 2014, I was told of a young boy who had liver cancer that developed an infection, an adenovirus, and he was being treated at St. Jude Research Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. That he could no longer be treated with the intravenous medication he was getting because he had kidney cancer, 4 stages of it over his 7-year period. And that St. Jude knew of an experimental drug known as brincidofovir being manufactured by a biotech company in North Carolina. And St. Jude was confident that this drug would cure the virus. I was told that Josh had no more than 2 weeks to live if he didn't get the drug. I learned that this company from 2009 through 2012 had given out this drug to 330 patients under what is known as expanded access. But that because it was a small company and it was expending an incredible amount of time and effort in not only developing the drugs, but giving the drug to patients that asked for it, that in 2012 they stopped the program of giving out the experimental drugs. So between 2012 and March of 2014, they turned down over 300 requests for the drug by children, by adults who were dying and in need of the drug. People that were rejected was the leader of a foreign country and a multi-billionaire from this country. I called the president of the company after I got contacted, Ken Mock, and we had several very controversial and aggressive telephone conversations, during which he told me that they just can't make an exception. We had a limited amount of time to accomplish getting the drug for Josh. We were able to assist in getting the mother on CNN on Sunday night, March 9, 2014, and Fox and Friends the morning of Monday, March 10. I was contacted by CBS and by Fox and Friends on Monday, March 10, arranged for the mother to have an appearance on Tuesday night, March 11, on CBS, and I went on Fox and Friends the morning of March 11 to plead the case. I pled the case to the board of directors of Chimerix, saying that Ken Mock hung up on me in our last call the day before, said there was nothing he could do. And I asked the board of directors if they've ever seen the movie A Time to Kill, with Matthew McConaughey's summation to the jury. A black man had killed the two white men who raped and brutalized his 8-year-old daughter. And Matthew McConaughey asked the jury to close their eyes and assume this girl was white. The jury came back with a verdict of not guilty. I asked the jury, let's try that. I asked Fox and Friends to allow me to make an appeal to the board of directors of Chimerix. And I said to them, referring to the Matthew McConaughey summation to the jury, to close their eyes and assume that there's a 7-year-old boy dying of an infection who says to his father, "Dad, when I die, who's going to take care of me in heaven?" I had been told that by the family. I then asked the board of directors, as their eyes were closed, to assume that that child was their son or their grandson, and then look me in the eye and tell me that you wouldn't get this drug to that boy. I then went back to my office, and the board of directors had taken down all their email addresses. But I sent an email to the president, Ken Mock, and to the secretary of the company, letting them know that if this boy died, I was going to be their worst nightmare, and that basically the government had given $72 million towards the development of this drug, that the Hardys were taxpayers, and hence they had standing to sue. And they had a lawyer with over 40 years of experience that would lead the case. I then get a phone call late in the day on Tuesday, March 11, from a producer at CBS. He said, "Call Ken Mock." I said, "Call Ken Mock. He hung up on me yesterday. Why should I call him?" He said, "We're not having this call, but call Ken Mock." I called Ken Mock late in the day, Tuesday, March 11, who told me that the announcement will be made after the market closed, that the pills that they turned down to over 330 other patients was going to be on a plane to Memphis, Tennessee. Josh got the drug on March 12th. He had less than a week to live, and it cured the infection. Ken Mock was fired less than 3 weeks later for giving the drug. Ken Mock and I have become friends. We have given speeches together, been on panels together, including at the New York Academy of Science. We were told that not only is a book being written about us, but by one of the authors of one of the articles that appeared in the Boston Globe, all about the Josh Hardy matter. I said to the author when she told me that she was considering writing a book, and after she interviewed me, I said, I'm only going to ask you one thing. And she said, what's that? She said, if it's made into a movie, I want Harrison Ford to play me. Ken Mock then said that he wants George Clooney. We then have assigned other actors and actresses to others that played significant role in the Josh Hardy matter, not the least of whom was Erica Bailey, who is our marketing director for Max Cure, that during the period of time on social media, she slept 20 minutes a night and basically got the word out so that we trended in the top 5 on social media nationally, if not internationally. I was interviewed by a German television program as a result of the Josh Hardy matter. It got widespread attention in Brazil, in France, in Germany, and in England. This is one of the things that put the Max Cure Foundation on the map, and we continue to be. And we're in the forefront of the advocacy in Washington, dealing with legislators, as well as getting the word out to the public about all the needs of pediatric cancer. It has been my great pleasure over these last 11 years to be involved with the Max Cure Foundation and such great people that I've met, not only with the Max Cure Foundation, but throughout the country, whose goal in life is to help children with cancer. And I can get no better sense of accomplishment in all my successes that I may have had over the years as a lawyer, to know that we have made a difference in the world of childhood cancers. Thank you.
He just spoke 34 minutes without barely taking a breath.